back to Monday night's football show. If you're just joining us, Jonathan Wilson has been breaking down most of the Premier League talking points. We'll do a little bit more on the Prem in just a moment. We want to chat a bit about yesterday's Old Firm. We want to begin part two by talking about the final day of the League of Ireland season. Ben Symes, you were covering this on Saturday. How are you doing?
I'm good. Owen, how are you?
Michael McCarthy's with us in studio as well. Hello, Mick.
Hello, lads.
So just to run you down through what happened, the couple of games that we were keeping a very close eye on were the games at Drogheda and at Shelbourne. So Drogheda beaten 4-1 by Bohs on Saturday afternoon, and then it was a 0-0 draw between Shells and St. Pat's, which means Bohs picked up fourth spot in the League of Ireland Premier Division table. They are going to need a favour from their rivals Shamrock Rovers on Sunday as they play Cork City in the Cup final. If Cork City are to cause some sort of upset, a massive upset in that final, then Bohs would miss out on Europe next season. So that is the lay of the land. When it comes to what you saw at Tolka on Saturday afternoon, Ben, was there a real sense of tension which ultimately just exploded into real frustration?
A little bit of tension, yeah. Pats really didn't kind of come into the game at all. It was really poor. We kind of made the point when we were there, if you went to this game and you didn't know who had something on the line, you would have thought it was Shelbourne.
Right.
And Shelbourne were the only team really that looked like scoring. Mason Mealy playing his last game, obviously before he goes to Tottenham, had a couple of chances. Vessels Bay made a couple of good saves and goal, but that was really it. Keane Levy had a good chance, could have squared it back to Mealy, didn't. But they literally had about 3 or 4 chances. There was not much intensity from them. Like, serious questions are going to have to be asked now of Stephen Kenny. A lot of people tipped them for the league coming into this, myself included, and they really, to not get Europe, that's the first time not getting Europe in 5 seasons, to not get Europe is a really, really huge blow.
The problem with the end of the season is that it's not like, okay, they can learn from this season's mistakes and try and build on it next season, given they're losing one of their best players. Like, that was the whole point why there was such belief in St. Pat's. They were like, oh, this guy's going to Tottenham Hotspur. This guy's smashed the then record for an Irish player being signed from the League of Ireland. They have to go close this year. So when you take Mealy out of that team next season, it's a different prospect. It
is. I also think injuries did play their part. Aidan Keenan missed a good portion of the season, the other striker who actually came off the bench on Saturday, and he looked bright enough up alongside Mealy. Ramal Palmer's another one who's missed a lot of the season. When he's played, he has looked good alongside Mealy. He's offered a bit of a threat alongside him. Now, the only thing about Palmer, I'll say, is they did sign him when he was injured. They signed him from Göztepe in Turkey, and he's never really got a full run of games, and we've never probably got to see this Pats team in full flight. The only time we probably did was the last 9 games of last season when they went on that incredible run to make Europe. But yeah, it's going to be a huge task, and it's probably going to be a bit of a rebuild task.
Right.
They're obviously going to miss Mealy. There's a big problem in the centre of the park. They kind of lack that big box-to-box midfielder that a lot of other teams have, or can dictate the tempo, like the likes of Matt Healy at Shamrock Rovers, or, although he's not as big, Dawson Devoy can dictate the tempo at Bohs. Pats don't really have that midfielder. Jamie Lennon is there in the holding position, but he won't really dictate the play. It's something that they're really, I think, going to have to look into next season, is getting that midfielder in.
Kenny's still got 4 more years on his contract. It was a big deal that he was handed. Like, we were talking about this with Jonathan in part 1. We're very, very quick to kind of throw a managerial name out there in terms of, you know, jobs being in jeopardy or a club being in crisis, like Tottenham, the perfect example with Thomas Frank. We're not quite at that level with Stephen Kenny yet, but is there a point of frustration that might reach a tipping point next season, say, if they're clearly languishing in the middle of the table where the best they can hope for is Europe?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that. Pats have been quite generously backed the last couple of seasons by Gareth Gallagher.
Yeah.
They do have one of the biggest budgets in the league alongside Derry and Shamrock Rovers. Like, they would have set out to start the season to be challenged for the title. So to not finish in Europe, like, yes, there's going to be questions for Kenny. As you said, it really isn't quite at that stage of talking about attacking. Like, it's a little bit too premature for that. He has got 4 years left on his deal. So if it continues into next season, and say we're looking at a stage where we're halfway through the next season, and, you know, you're a little bit off European places, then yeah, you probably do bring that question in. But at the moment, it's a little bit premature.
If £2 million coming in, like, immediately, and would obviously rise to 4, I think, wasn't it, in terms of euros? Anyway, I know that we for some reason report all these things in sterling, but I think there's like €2 million coming in for Mealy. They'll have not necessarily the pick of the market, but if that they'll be able to rebuild the squad in the off season.
Yeah, they will. Now,
but you'd be worried about what they'll do with that money.
Yeah,
as well.
you'd be worried about what to do with the money. There's the other side that going, is the money really, obviously it's huge for the club. Is it all going to go into transfer funds? I don't know.
It doesn't need to, though.
It doesn't need to. Pats are usually quite generously backed in the transfer window as it is. Now, obviously, Europe plays a big factor in that. There's no Europe. You're missing on a huge income, as we've seen Shelbourne and Shamrock Rovers get in this season. It will be interesting to see where the money goes. Pats have a brilliant setup at the underage level. They just won the under-17, won the league at the weekend, which means they're going to go off to the UEFA Youth League. And I was actually at the Mark Farron Cup final where they played Waterford off the park, and they do have very good young players coming through. The problem with Pats is they just have this cluster of players in the senior team that you don't really see a pathway for any of these young players coming through. Melia is an exception. He's exceptional. Michael Noonan had to leave the club to get first team football in the end because Melia was there. I struggle to look at that Pat squad and where did they go next? You know.
Speaking of patience, should they not be taking a leaf out of the Bohemians book and looking at how their season panned out and say we can do that? Just a little bit of belief in Stephen Kenny. Even the noise, if the noise gets a little bit poisonous next season, just stick to your guns.
Yeah, well, we did hear Alan Reynolds after the game saying he doesn't care what people think about his performances this season. Yeah, they stuck by him at Bows. They stuck by Alan Reynolds. They had quite a poor start to the season. They had Stevie O'Donnell come in as well as assistant manager. Obviously, previously was head coach at Pats and Dundalk. And it worked out for them. There was a situation there a couple of weeks ago where I personally thought Bows nearly had Europe kind of wrapped up and they kind of let it slip away, and it came down to that final day, but they had that emphatic win up in Drogheda. I think what that's shown is sometimes we're very quick to dismiss managers. And there was a lot of clamour from Bows fans, obviously not so much from other fans of the league, to dismiss him really, really soon into the project. And I'm quite glad to see he's been rewarded with a new contract till 2027. And it also means that you go into this off-season for Bows, they might have Europe to offer players, but also what you have to offer is, if the manager's going to buy a player, the player knows the manager wants me and the manager is here for another at least 2 seasons. As a player, that's so enticing to go and join that type of setup. So I'm glad they stuck by him. I'm glad they gave him that deal. And it's something we're just too quick to dismiss managers of in the middle of a project.
It was a weird season overall, though, wasn't it? So Bows had lots of ups and downs, and Reynolds was under pressure a lot. But they also beat Rovers 3 times, and so they had these mad ups as well. And it was nobody could put anything together. Even Rovers for a finish, they almost did with Chelsea. If the season was 2 weeks longer, would they have even won the league? Derry only put a run of wins together when it's almost like a mathematical
impossibility,
almost impossibility to win the league. They start winning every game. Shells just completely, did not defend their title, and again got all the results they needed.
Still only finished 7 points off.
But that's the thing, they did at the end of the season. They got all the results they needed to make sure they got Europe and kind of back the quality that was in the squad while doing what they're doing in Europe and so on. So it was it was almost like not a throwaway season, but it feels like the way the league is at the moment. If you take the last 2 years, and last year was a lot more dramatic than this year, but actually, it seems like this mismatch where there's no really great team. Rovers are
a brilliant team.
They're just not, whether it's that they're fighting on too many fronts or what it is, that they're just not.
We have to remember that Rovers team didn't really get a break as well at the end of last season. They went straight into that Molde game in February and then straight into the league. I think they might have had a 2-week break. You also can't forget Shelbourne had the disarray of Damien Duff leaving halfway through the season, which we have to commend. Joey
O'Brien
O'Brien
hasn't dropped in the league since
it's picked up since Damien Duff left, and huge credit has to go to Joey O'Brien for that. And also not just the upturn in form, but also there was a lot of players kind of on the periphery there. The likes of Ali Cood has started nearly every game now for Shells in this run, and he was in and out of the team during Duff, and people were kind of wondering what's going on here. Ellis Chapman, also another player, was in and out of the team. Joey O'Brien deserves huge credit for kind of steering that ship, but the Rovers thing is a bit of a disappointment. I remember Keith Tracy, we were at Talca Park for Shamrock Rovers Shelbourne back in May, and Keith Tracy said to me after the game, this league's done. And it was back in May. So it is a disappointment no team has been able to pull up a fight and challenge. And as you said, it goes for Rovers as well. There's no team that have been able to string together a good set of until Shelbourne when it's too late.
Yeah, my point was going to be, though, that if you look at, say, the early season form of Galway, Waterford, or even the last couple of years, it feels like that they're on a high, and they end up kind of scrapping to not be in the relegation playoff. And I think there is just a little bit more depth there, and I think there is more parity as well at the moment, and it's just made for a kind of a strange league. It's like it hasn't sorted itself out yet as to who it is. So it's like Galway and Waterford like seemed like they were gonna. I think in seasons gone by there would have been one or two of the Dublin clubs in crisis, and they would have had good seasons, and they would have finished, scraping for fourth or fifth. Instead, they're battling relegation despite being pretty good. I do think there's way more depth there now.
And there definitely was a case where halfway through the season we thought that it was Sligo and Cork dead set to go down, and we have to commend Sligo for that. They had 2 wins in their opening 15 games and finished on 41 points and 11 wins. So you have to commend the bottom of the table for that they did also kind of drag Galway and Waterford into this. It wasn't, them kind of falling off fun completely.
For sure. We'll have plenty more to talk about next week if Cork City do upset the odds this weekend. And given Rovers' recent form, it's not the biggest shock that will ever have occurred at the Aviva Stadium were it to go that way, but still quite unlikely. Bohemians fans obviously hoping that.
Those fans filling up the Aviva next week.
Yeah. Right, there's a couple of other talking points from Cross Channel that we want to do after this very quick break.
Football on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by William Hill. Download the app and play today. 18 plus gamblingcare.ie.
This is News Talk. Football on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by William Hill. Download the app and play today. 18 plus gamblingcare.ie.
This is News Talk.
Welcome back. Obviously, it wasn't a great start to the week last week in terms of the Republic of Ireland and their number 9 options going into the next international window. One more weekend, and then it's time for another double header of pleasure for Ireland football fans. But as the week finished, the story might just have changed because Sligo man Johnny Kenny is playing and scoring in back-to-back games for Celtic. Obviously scored a brace against Falkirk, and then yesterday in the League Cup against Rangers was sensational. I watched the majority of this game. First of all, I missed the 0-0 between them early in the season, which was the worst game of football ever played. And I think there was like some overcompensation yesterday to prove that the old firm still has a bit about it, because this was absolute chaos. But every time Celtic were attacking, it was somehow Johnny Kenny dribbling the ball through the centre of their defence. So it wasn't just the quality of Johnny Kenny's play yesterday. It was just how much he was everywhere. Like, he was all over the place, so central to what they're doing. Martin O'Neill clearly trusts the hell out of this guy. And you look at what Callum McGregor was saying after the game. Like, he spoke about Johnny scoring 2 during the week. I just knew he'd have an impact on Sunday. He's taken himself to another level in terms of status now, brimming with confidence. Then he says there's been times when he's been out of the squad, but he's a player who trains so hard every day and has a nice finish as well. So he's one that's just going to keep developing, and strikers with confidence can go and conquer the world.
There you go. I often look at see what fans of, now it's online fans, so they're necessarily negative, so you have to weight that, but what they say about players, Irish players, because I think we can be looking for them and we're watching them almost single-eyed in these games. So I've used a lot of Google Translate recently to try and figure out what Roma fans have been saying about Evan Ferguson, for example. But Celtic fans have been remarkably negative about Kenny up until last week. In a kind of a, like, this is everything that's wrong with the club. This is who, this is the guy that we think is our striker. What they don't know what they're doing. And suddenly Martin O'Neill comes in, and it's like, let's just say that's changed in the last 4 or 5 days. It just feels like that Kenny is just going to suit what they're trying to do. And look, he's in an unbelievable position there, because regardless of if things are great with Celtic or not at the moment, if you're the main forward player for Celtic, you are going to have the opportunity to score a lot of goals, and be that against Rangers or whoever. You can quickly find yourself getting used to that, and really rising in the game because of it. So hopefully it is a start of things to come. I'd be interested in what you like. It wasn't just that he scored; it was that he was very central to the play.
I texted the group chat that don't worry about a lack of Evan. We've got Johnny Kenny, and then he scores.
Okay.
It was now, you do give the allowance for like the frantic nature that was definitely there yesterday. I do wonder if the turgidity, is that a word, of the opening fixture between them this season played into how they both approached it yesterday. Like, we've got to save the old firm. Like, we've got to meet each other halfway here and not throw up the absolute dross that became almost infamous early in the season. So maybe there was always going to be a bit of chaos there. And if you have like a number 9 who's instructed to come a little bit deep to pick up the ball and then run at goal, or be a bit of a support man in terms of the wingers coming off you, maybe that's just the perfect conditions for someone like Johnny Kenny to shine. And also you're kind of keeping an extra eye on him because he's Irish. I must say, seeing Martin O'Neill on the sideline in a tracksuit,
Felt at home.
God, it's a beautiful, warm sense of nostalgia. I haven't.
And the cop is on. Don't forget that.
Oh, absolutely. Like I haven't felt a sense of warmth towards Martin O'Neill in a long time.
Yeah.
Like he's done nothing other than just gone back to manage Celtic.
He's just wearing the Celtic colours again.
It just feels right.
You know what? Like all the way you're thinking there is like we're thinking Martin O'Neill, Magic Man. I can see Henrik Larsson in my mind's eye for the last week scoring goals against Rangers.
Henrik Larsson or
6-2
Johnny
game
Kenny?
in 2000, one of the greatest games that I ever remember. The buzz around the Oval, like you'd go to the pub to watch an Old Firm back then. Like it just feels so foreign now, but. It was all about Martin O'Neill. It just comes back, like, you know, Celtic with Umbro as both their shirt maker and their sponsor.
Yeah. It's funny, I was also getting flashbacks to the grim pubs that my dad would bring me to in the mid-2000s to watch these games where Martin O'Neill would be manager. Yeah, it's a lovely throwback. So, League Cup final versus St Mirren, one of the most exciting teams in Europe. Celtic versus St Mirren in the Scottish League Cup final is the picture there. Just a couple of things we wanted to wrap up on from the Premier League yesterday. Touched on what I described as the baton of crisis being passed from West Ham to Newcastle yesterday with Jonathan Wilson earlier on. How does it feel to be crisis-free as a West Ham United supporter, Ben?
I wouldn't say crisis-free just yet, but we've definitely got a big glimmer of hope. When Nuno came in, his first game was against Everton, and you got a bit of hope that game. We got a 1-1 draw, and there was passion on the sidelines, which is something that we really missed under Graham Potter. Like, you know, I've heard people say if you watch Graham Potter for 90 minutes, you wouldn't know what scores by the end of the game. He just kind of stands on the edge of the touchline. Whereas Nuno brings that energy, and you can see what it means to him after a goal goes in. The big thing for us yesterday was, one, players being played in the right position. We had young left back Ollie Scars in the right wing for the last couple of weeks, and Kyle Walker-Peters at left back. Everything was a bit all over the place, but we had a structured midfield, and that came with Mateus Fernandes and Lucas Paqueta ahead of the new star Freddie Potts.
Talk to us about Freddie Potts. So his dad is a West Ham legend who is on the coaching ticket.
His dad is Steve Potts, who played over 500 times for West Ham. His brother Dan played for West Ham about a decade ago. He was actually on the Luton team that got promoted to Premier League a couple of years ago. I first saw Freddie Potts a couple of seasons ago in the Conference League when we still had Declan Rice at the club. And Freddie came on, and it was like watching Declan Rice 2.0. Like, it was a clone. We'd never seen, you'd never seen anything like Declan Rice play for West Ham in my lifetime. Now you've gotten to see another one. And it's taken a while. He played every game in pre-season out in America, and he was outstanding, and we came into the season and Graham Potter didn't pick him. Now we've seen him, he just brings that kind of scanning in front of the back four, that like level of calmness that we've missed. Someone who's good on the ball, can dictate the play a little bit, but knows when to give it to the likes of Paqueta or Fernandes ahead of him. I mean, I don't know if you caught any of the game. Every single time he had the ball, the camera nearly panned to Steve Potts on the touchline. He's now, of course, a first-team coach at West Ham. It was phenomenal to see. It was something I hadn't seen in so long at West Ham. And also, it was something that we so badly needed, not just that kind of midfielder in there, but also to have an academy product. I feel like it's something that you always associate with West Ham, whether it's been Declan Rice or before that, you're going back to Frank Lampard, Michael Carrick, even Rio Ferdinand, Bobby Moore, if you want to go really far back. You've had players who, to do the old cliche, they know what it's like to play for West Ham. They know the West Ham ways. You've heard from fans for so long. It was so nice and refreshing to see one of your own out there.
It's home to Burnley next for West Ham on Saturday, and then after the international break, it's just an absolutely brutal fixture list. Away to Bournemouth, home to Liverpool, away to Manchester United, away to Brighton, and then it's Aston Villa and Manchester City as the next two fixtures. So it might be like 1 week of joy for West Ham fans. But generally speaking, even if those results don't go West Ham's way, is your gut feeling that Nuno is the man?
Before this week, I wouldn't have been so hard on my sleeve. Nuno is the man. After that form to the weekend and watching players in the right position, yes. And you also look at the other managers out there and you go, would any other manager do a better job than Nuno Espirito Santo can do for the season at West Ham? Probably not. He is also going to bring that connection to the fans where, that old English cliche of he gets it, and he shows that passion on the touchline. He's brought coaches from the youth team into the first team, which again is always going to go down well at West Ham. I would be confident. It's that Burnley game next weekend. It's the huge one. That's the big 6 point. If you win that, you're back up with the teams outside of the relegation zone.
Would you prefer to play Burnley in turf more than at your stadium?
Yeah, probably at the moment.
Maybe yesterday kind of exercises all the ghosts.
It hasn't. Like, that was our first win since February.
Yeah.
At home, which is just remarkable
Shocking.
to think of.
They were so bad against Brentford a couple of weeks ago, like, you know, in an empty stadium when it was only 1-0 and they're pressing for an equaliser, like thing. And the sit-in protest yesterday, like, there's a lot going on there outside of what's happening in the pitch.
Well, that Brentford game really highlighted there was a protest to not turn up at that one, which, I mean, I'm sure you've all seen and I've experienced in that stadium, whether there's fans there or not, the atmosphere is flat. So to not have fans there on a night fixture against a team that, like, you really should be going up against, yeah, there was no excuse for that.
One of the other things that we didn't mention this evening on the football show was the cruel irony of Brentford getting caught by a long throw, which Nathan Collins headed into his own net. It was just a sort of, the people who are anti the Tony Pulisification of football would have got great joy out of that. But Crystal Palace putting Brentford to the sword 2-0. Do you want to mention Aston Villa, Mick, before we...
Not really, no. It was a very poor performance, and like, it's not to be... You might think there's a kind of an arrogance coming on and complaining about losing at Anfield, but like, Liverpool have lost 6 of their last 7 games. Villa have won 6 of their last 7, and I just felt like they didn't put up a fight against them. Like, they hit the post there. They could have scored. They could have got 1-0 up, but the biggest issue is, like, for God's sake, I mean, Arne Slott's been doing interviews after everything saying, please don't play long balls against us. We're literally not able to defend long balls. And Villa went and played the most, you know, old style, progressive build-up play of all time, which obviously ended up with Emi Martinez kicking the ball directly to Mo Salah, who just side-footed the ball straight into the net. Bizarre goal. But it just played into their hands. It's very disappointing. But, like, you know, it's grand. I thought Liverpool looked a little bit better, and you would nearly expect them to beat Villa, and that's fine. They've played Spurs away, City at home, and Liverpool away in the last 3 games and got 6 points. So overall, fine. But on its own merits, it was a really disappointing performance. It did mean I could turn it off once Gravenberch scored and concentrate on the Ireland-New Zealand game.
Just as New Zealand took the lead.
Exactly.
There we go.
Yeah.
The life of a sports fan. Mick McCarthy, Ben Symes, thanks a million for being with me in studio this evening for Monday night's football show. And if you've missed any of tonight's Off the Ball, including Jonathan Wilson or Monday Night Rugby with Jerry Thornley and Andy Dunn, it's all available now on demand for Off the Ball members. offtheball.com/join for more details. Off the Ball Breakfast is back tomorrow morning from 7:30. We'll be back at 7 p.m. tomorrow night on News Talk with Brian O'Driscoll, John Caulfield and Emer Vranon on her new book, The Dodger, DJ Carey and the Great Betrayal. Tom Dunn is up next here. Good night.